federal marshal named Eugene, who goes by Gene for short, I don't remember his last name, appears and attempts to play what appears to be a helpful role. He tries to give us information about Lauren's status, remind us that she's okay, makes himself available to answer certain questions. To his credit, he appears nervous and rattled. If that's really how he felt, then I honor that. But of course he could have been acting. Marshals have a little bit of a reputation of that. I end up approaching him later and asking him, if he has any concerns about the way Lauren's camera situation was handled. How she was repeatedly told, hey, you can come pick up your camera. And then she would come to get the camera and they wouldn't have it for her. He, of course, didn't have much of an answer for me, and he is he's lower ranking than Monier and DiMartino, so maybe not the ultimate person responsible. But certainly he seemed to be handling himself professionally, as did most of the officials that we dealt with today. One thought I had is it might have been better if more of us had stayed a little bit closer to Kat, so more of us could have witnessed what was happening. I was actually in a different room when they actually hauled her away. I counted 25, probably actually more like 26 Canario supporters, either in the courtroom or outside protesting. Interestingly, that's almost exactly the same as the number of federal personnel who ended up showing up in the courtroom. They almost always seem to figure out a way to have the same number of people on their side as are on our side. It's like they go and scour the building for every clerk and janitor they can find and throw them in there and have them just sit there. So there's the same number of federal employees as there are people, average citizens. To their credit, however, the authorities, unlike some local authorities we've dealt with in other states, like Connecticut, they didn't seem to make any effort at messing with us in terms of, screwing around with the scheduling, that sort of thing. The trials and appearances occurred exactly when and where they said they would. As the courtroom fills up with more and more federal employees, I start recognizing more and more people who are involved in my arrest, the arrest that triggered Lauren's act of civil disobedience a year ago. There's a Deputy Barry who shows up in the courtroom, who was my jailer, and who I found to be a very personable, very human person in there. It didn't seem at all comfortable with the kinds of things that he was arresting us for. I walked up to him, said hi, and thanked him for his professionalism. And that put me back in contact with Colonel Therian, or I call him Colonel Therian because he was a colonel in the Air Force, but maybe Commander Therian, I guess, is his real current title. I don't know which he prefers, but that gave me a chance to finally get a little bit talking with Colonel Therian. I couldn't hear him very well; he wasn't that close to me, but I appreciated the fact that he was actually acknowledging my existence. Some of these Homeland Security people, they want to pretend like you're not there if you're a civil disobedience person, and but he, I talked to him a little bit. I said that I got the same impression about him back in July '07 when he arrested me for distribution of handbills. Or when he was part of the process of having me arrested for distribution of handbills. I said, I got the impression you didn't like arresting me or Lauren, and I appreciate that and honor the fact that you didn't take any joy in that. And I think what he said to me, he goes, well, we're not here to arrest people. He said to me, but you, Dave, you put me in you kind of put me in a position. You forced the issue, he said. I said, well, that's one way of looking at it, and I also said, I can't really hear you very well, but I appreciate you speaking with me. Now, at this point, or roughly around that point, Lauren is wheeled into the room. They have given her a wheelchair because she refuses to walk where they tell her. When she comes in, all of her supporters stand. When we sit down again, I look up and notice that Lauren's husband, Jim Johnson, has stood back up and attempts to approach Lauren inside this area where apparently peons are not supposed to go. Well, the authorities immediately center on him and swarm him and begin laying hands on him. They don't hurt him, but they say, oh, you're not allowed in here, come on out, and they grab him by the hand and everything. And he says, I'm her counsel. So I guess he wanted to, you know, play the role of maybe not attorney, but someone to stand there and discuss things with her and represent her to some extent. One of the security guards grabbed his arm, kind of pulled him back into the, you know, peon area, and said, "Don't come past this point again." I counted roughly 27 federal personnel in the courtroom, which just coincidentally was almost exactly the same as our number of people. As best I could tell, there was no one there against what Lauren was doing, except federal employees. During the sort of scuffle is probably too big of a word for it, but the the kind of conflict between Lauren's husband Jim and these federal officers, there was a point in time where he ended up sort of standing in front of them, sort of eye to eye, and they suggested that he sit down. And I'm not sure if this is the right thing to say or not, but I've always been inspired by Russell Canning's idea, who says that when you're dealing with bureaucrats in a potentially hostile situation, it's really good to sit down. So I encouraged Jim to sit down, and eventually he did. Although I'm not sure he was listening to me. He was really focused on those agents. When Lauren is brought into the room, of course, another thing that happened is Joe Haas says, "All rise for the honorable defendant," and so everybody stood up. I don't know if I mentioned that before or not. Of course, when the judge came in, I guess all 26 of us, roughly however many there were, remained seated. Those of us who were Lauren supporters, of course, the federal personnel, stood. I noticed at least one Free Stater who actually made an effort to sit, even though he didn't have a place to sit when the judge came in. And at this point there was a lull, and we were able to start talking to Lauren a little bit. I had some questions for her. I wanted to know what her message was for people that might be watching this. She said, quote, "Even if you don't hurt anyone, even if you haven't hurt anyone or broken anything, they can still put you in jail," unquote. I asked her what kinds of things might be helpful for people to do while she's in this situation, and she said call where she is and ask about her well-being. She says that would be helpful. She said, or seemed to indicate that there was some concern about the temperature of her cell, so we questioned her about that. She said the temperature was not a big issue. Two marshals or jailers, I think they were marshals, stood and or sat next to her during most of the trial, and both were wearing heavy black gloves, or relatively heavy. And of course they're wearing suits, and it made me think of the Serenity characters, the corporate hitmen for Blue Sun, who wander around in suits and wearing blue gloves, 2x2 hands of blue. When people started to testify, the government people, Lauren several times interrupted them to let them know that she couldn't hear them very well. I think the first person to take the stand was Homeland Security Commander Michael Therrien. They asked Therrien to try and describe our organization, the New Hampshire Underground. That's what the prosecutors asked him to describe us. Therrien said he was reluctant to speak for us or try and describe exactly what we were. He said, basically, I think you'd have to ask them. He said, quote, "I don't know if I'd want to use the word anti-government, but that seems to pop up a lot," unquote.